the problem is that our brain is so big that actually we have responsibility to this whole planet. We have the responsibility to control our own population because we have no predator. If we have no predator on this planet, how will this population be controlled? Mm-hmm. How will it be controlled? We have to have a predator. Therefore, that predator has to be us.
I'm Dean Walker, and welcome to the Poetry of Predicament podcast, a podcast for people brave enough to face humanity's challenges and problems, and most importantly, our numerous predicaments. The Poetry of Predicament is a podcast meant to inspire us to bring forth grace, beauty, and connection with the web of life in the face of a predicament-laden world. This week on the Poetry of Predicament podcast, I'm delighted to welcome back George Tsakraklides. He's one of my favorite science communicators, also a remarkable essayist and now fiction writer as well. Hope you'll help me welcome George to the show, and hope you'll enjoy his wry wit and remarkable wisdom with regard to a number of aspects of what it is to be a human being in these times. George Tsakraklides. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast. I am your ever-present host, Dean Walker, and it is Saturday morning here in the west coast of the USA, and I am just delighted to have George Tsakraklides joining us here. George, I think you've been here 3 other times over the past, 5 years or something. It seems like we've talked a few times.
Yeah, I think it's like the 3rd time today or 4th. I'm not sure.
Yeah, me too.
Always good to be here.
Yeah, and I know that you're calling in from London, and we haven't talked since the entire COVID thing's gone on. So we were just starting to tap into some of that, and I had to stop you, which you warned me quite accurately, you're going to have to stop me. So last thing I want to do actually is stop you. I want to get you going here in this conversation. And George, I know you from Medium and at least one of your books, and I just find you to be a remarkably skilled writer across a number of different intersectional issues that we are all facing and are all quite familiar. But you also have a pretty wry sense of humor, as well as a piercing knowledge about a number of those topics. So it's always, I learn a lot, I laugh a lot, and border on tears a lot when we talk. So I'm really glad to be reconnecting with you. And I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't mind, for anyone who hasn't experienced your work or hasn't seen any of the earlier interviews, if you would introduce yourself as you would like to be known now. And I don't know what you're up to now. If there's anything that new, kind of the newest, latest, greatest of what you're up to, I would love to hear that. And we were just talking before the recorder went on about somehow catching up, meaning how do we share? How do we possibly share these times, especially this whole COVID chapter of our global civilization? So I just know we both will have plenty to share. So if you wouldn't mind setting the groundwork of how you'd like to be known now, what's relevant in terms of how you would introduce yourself. And then I would appreciate it if you would also just feel free to pick whatever issues, whatever topics are most alive for you. just take your pick of any of the threads that are alive, and let's just go. So welcome, and here we go.
Who is George?
This
Okay,
George.
so in a nutshell, for those who don't know me, I'm a biologist. I have 3 degrees in the chemical and biological sciences, but I'm mostly, for the purposes of today, I'm basically an author. So I write books about different, I guess, crises. I've written about different existential crises, and most often it's just essays. But lately I've written a novella, which is a climate fiction, you could say, eco thriller. Other people have described it, which is about, it's about a mutation that happens in the ocean, and it ends up demonstrating that Earth is sentient. That's sort of the message of the book, and that we are all, subject to the whims of this planet and the physical forces which are, which never change.
George, I'm going to be including in the show notes links to each thing you mentioned. Would you mind mentioning the name of that novella?
Also, the book is called A New Earth, The Apocalypse Locus. I won't go further into it. Thanks for including it. For those who like science fiction, who like science, biology, existential sort of discussion, there's a bit of everything in there, and a lot of suspense as well. And there's even a fantasy element to it. And I guess I'm going to say one last thing. I thought for a while about writing fiction, and I resisted it because fiction is fiction. And I've always written about the present and the crises that humanity is going through now, which don't need any fiction. They don't need any imagination. They are wilder than any imagination could have conceived, the kind of crises that we're going through today. For example, the pandemic. I'm sure before the pandemic, there were hundreds of thousands of books written about plagues, none of which would have predicted what happened. But as a species, it is really our imagination which has taken us where we are today. And if we can imagine future crises, then this is a benefit to our awareness of preventing them potentially. So that's why I wrote a fiction novel this time, and I think my next book will probably be fiction as well.
Yeah. Well,
so,
if you don't mind, I'm going to be the skeptic straight away. I'll be the devil's advocate for a moment. I love that you just spoke a possibility. Like, if we were to start to imagine, if we were to use in a good way the lovely fruits of authors' labors like your novella and so on, if we could start to spark a new level of imagination, and we could look forward in a constructive way and say, oh, remember that novel that George wrote, and that spoke to an issue very similar to this. Let's activate that part of our memory, and let's be inspired in a what's the word I'm looking for, a way of, in a predictive, or in a way that could possibly reduce the amount of suffering that we seem to be headed into in this particular moment. And the skeptic in me just says, we don't know a damn thing. We won't predict a damn thing. We have not a speck of collective curiosity, and no hope of being able to dredge it up from some unknown pocket of our collective selves to all of a sudden be interested in having a forward and wholesome view into our own future. So if I could just put that curmudgeonly kind of negative and cynical piece in for balance. I'm not used to doing that. I don't make that a habit, but for some reason this morning I'm not feeling particularly inspired or generous toward humanity at large.
Well, Dina, I didn't write the book because I was hoping I would change the world. Let me just put it to you that way.
Okay.
It's I don't actually. I don't. I'm so close to the book and to the characters, each of which is actually kind of a split personality out of me. They just thought if you take me and split it into 5 different people, you get these different characters.
Right.
It's more. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic world. So the stuff that we talk about has actually already happened, which is what I believe will happen. As I said, we're actually just finishing the job now. We've made a lot of Earth extinct, and unless we start finishing the job, only then we might actually start realizing what we've done. And I know that's very dark and that's very doomist, and I accept all of that. All of those labels, bring them on. I am all of it. It does, though, I think, fables and stories and even fiction does help our mind become aware of the possibilities, whether they are positive or negative or terrifying possibilities. This is how we've created this whole civilization out of imagination. We've used our imagination in ways that were very selfish, very speciesistic, thinking that the fact that we are the most intelligent species actually gives us the sort of moral authority to make other species extinct, and that the value of that life that becomes extinct is actually insignificant. If we were to go extinct, then that would be a huge loss to the Earth because we are so intelligent. When, as a matter of fact, actually, we are the #1 species that the Earth wouldn't miss if we went extinct.
Absolutely.
We have absolutely nothing to offer to this planet. Tell me one thing, I'm putting this to the whole audience. Think of one thing that humans are needed for on this planet. Nothing. And take any other species, and I can tell you what it's needed for. Even mosquitoes, everything. Like mosquitoes, you can say mosquitoes carry viruses from one host to another, and that helps to shuffle the DNA and help evolution. There you go. It's it's good to think, because I do, as much as I'm a doomer, I do think that 3 degrees Celsius could be better than 5 degrees Celsius.
Yes.
Minimizing and adapting and all of that is still worth a discussion. No, I'm not hoping to start a revolution. Sorry.
Okay,
I'm neither Hitler or some good guy that wrote some other book.
Yeah, I'm with you. Just to give you a little update on what I've been doing and what the body of work is evolving into. A lot of similar threads than when we last talked, which was maybe two and a half years ago. I don't remember. That continues. I really am wanting to be of service to people wherever they enter the collapse-aware conversation. Of course, there are people who've been at at a very high level of awareness and systems awareness and so on, who've been at this conversation for decades. And as of course, there will always be people, and the vast majority of humanity will be in the business as usual, or the, as Paul Tsakraklides likes to call it, the dead asleep level. You know, that will be the vast majority of the planet from now till whatever the end is for us all. But there are what I would call a first aid resilience level, or each level that I'm about to describe has its own skill set that is available to the people that are at that level. Mm-hmm. And my intention is to provide the best menu of skills and capacities and so on that could be offered at each of those levels. And so that's what I'm doing these days. And primarily, while every level is active, I'm continually upgrading the tools that are offered at each level. The vast majority of my focus is on the level that I would call, and it's kind of in the middle, is the practices of reconnection. That if we can agree that what got us into this global predicament is our individual and collective disconnection from the primary sources of meaning and relationship in life, in which, for ease of conversation, I usually put that into disconnection from deeper self, from other people, from earth, and from soul. And the practices of reconnection idea is really the answer to my simple question when I was finished writing my book back in 2017, The Impossible Conversation. I just asked, so if we're in a predicament, and if I'm an average person who wants to get out of bed every morning and somehow make the world a slightly better place, just do something that will be a positive offering to the world at any scale. How can I do that in the face of a predicament? And the answer just kept coming back. Take on practices that reconnect you with the web of life. So that, in a nutshell, is the work that I'm doing and my own practices. And I'm curious if any of that sparks you from the declaration that what we're in is not only immense challenges and problems, but also at the crux of it, a series of predicaments that we've created.
Yeah, I think of reconnection a bit more broadly. So the way that you phrased it, and maybe I misunderstood it, is reconnecting with all the things that, you know, our economic system has disconnected us from, you know, relationships, you know, real food, real preoccupations, you know, even going for a walk, you know, having meaningful entertainment, all of that. But for me, reconnection is actually also reconnecting with the bad, because to really reconnect, you need to be anchored in the present, and the present is not good. So you need to actually reconnect with reality and reconnect with the tragedy and really feel it. Because if you don't reconnect it, like any sort of trauma, and you try to push it and, you know, stifle it, it gets worse. The more you try to hide it and package it, the less you're able to process it. So we're going through a massive trauma that people are experiencing in different ways. And some people don't even know that it's related to the climate or the overshoot of civilization. My cousin's mother-in-law lost her house in the Boulder, Colorado fires. Now, I'm not that close to her, but I don't know if she knows that that is related to the end of civilization that is resulting in this climate apocalypse that's coming, which is, you know, intensifying all these weather events all around the world. I'm not sure if she knows that she is a climate refugee.
Mm-hmm.
So I think to me, reconnecting is about actually reconnecting, first of all, with the right here, right now, and the tragedy. And
Yes.
then the other reconnection that I think you talk about is also very important. It's about, okay, what do I do with the rest of my life?
Mm-hmm.
And what impacts, positive impact can I have on the people around me, the nature around me, whether it is starting a wildflower garden to help bees that live in a city. You know, what are the little things that I can do, and maybe the big things that I can do, you know, depending how much, you know, umph I have. It's all about bringing meaning back into our life, you know, reconnection. As if you reconnect with anything actually that's within your immediate reality, all of a sudden you feel alive, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mean, yeah, I mean, this is the crux of it. We've been put to sleep basically by this civilization that just wants us to have lots of children so that there's more consumers.
Yes.
And they will buy and they will pay dearly to go into university, and you know, the whole system will be feeding on our cash.
Yes.
And it will, this is, you know, and this is relatively recent. I mean, we have increasing evidence of how humans have actually never been benign on this planet. I know that this is going to sound controversial. I always get people respond to some of my comments on Twitter saying, but no, look, the primitives, look, they were just harmless. It's because they hadn't developed the toolkits, and also there weren't that many of them. But the brain that they had of modern humans 45,000 years ago is the same brain that we have today.
Yeah, we could talk for a while about what happened to the megafauna on the Australian continent, just as one example. They didn't just disappear on their own.
They disappeared just when humans entered Australia. And this is just fascinating that this evidence seems to be, at least that it come to my awareness recently. But I think this is an area that we are still looking into. And it's quite tragic actually, and frightening that we're finding out now, so many millions, thousands, I don't know how many years we're talking about later, that we were responsible for the extinction of, you know, same thing in North America, you know, where we have, you know, the American Indians. They're supposed to be this kind of like idealistic version of humans that feel the earth. But, you know, they were Homo sapiens. They're part of our species. And we made things extinct wherever we went.
Yeah. Let me pause you, because that's a very strong track. And I just want to acknowledge where you went in response to that brief layout that I gave you of a part of the kind of stages of awareness in the model that I use for this work. And I just wanted to acknowledge how dead on accurate your assessment was, that one of the first steps, especially as one gets up into the more engaged and systemically aware stages of awareness, we must start with the deeper and often darker elements. We have to tell the truth. There is just no way around it. You know, there's plenty of avoiding the truth. That's what this entire culture, ecocidal and omnicidal culture, is built on. But as one steps up those stages of systemic awareness, there is no lying to ourselves up there. And that means we have to do shadow work, both individually and collectively. So I just wanted to mention that we're on a very similar page with that. And you know, I recall your piercing observation that kind of element, and I'm glad that you're bringing it to this today, because you mentioned something about an acceleration. It seems like we are in a time of acceleration of those shadow elements that you're mentioning. So I just wanted to kind of emphasize what your point was there. Let you know that I'm completely in alignment with it. And if it becomes a thread we follow, great. And I interrupted you as you were pointing out that even those supposedly idealistic indigenous cultures throughout the past 100,000 years or so, that they perhaps had their own shadows to deal with and have their own past to look at in terms of their very human impact on the more than human population around them at the time. So thanks for letting me interrupt. Are you sparked to go in any direction from there?
Well, just taking it one step further, I think, because reconnection is also about reconnecting inwardly, looking into ourselves and understanding who we are as a species and as a person, because most of us think that we're not a species, that we came from a spaceship, or we're not actually connected to the beings on this planet. Or we are connected, but we are just so super advanced on them that they are just worthless. And the thing is that there's actually a lot of truth to that in terms of how super advanced we are. The evolution of the human brain to the size that modern humans have has been both a blessing for us and a tragedy for the planet. Our brain is absolutely massive, and the things that we are able to do with this brain, ever since it emerged out of mutations and selections and whatnot, is what has led us to the ability to be essentially the super predator of the planet, a predator that has no predators. Even viruses, we can get vaccines against viruses. So I guess this leads me to you can take it for this conversation in many ways. If only we had the awareness of how dangerous the human brain is on this planet, how it can do anything it wants, and it has been doing anything it wants, and
especially when it's super fueled by the fossil fuel revolution. And then on top of that, the ingenious development of things like the internet and the advanced kind of hyper ingenious development that we've seen in the past 100 years.
We've had a number of revolutions, a number of technological revolutions, and every time there's a revolution, I guess that probably the most impactful one in a negative way has been the industrial revolutions, for two reasons. Well, the first reason is all the increase in CO2 that began with the industrial revolution. I mean, it began before that by deforestation, which destroyed carbon sinks. And also deforestation also happened in places like Australia, where you said, where the primitive humans burned down forests as a routine way to create agricultural land. And in fact, this is apparent. This is another fact I learned recently, is that the reason why Australia is 77% something eucalyptus is because of that. That was all that survived, because it's such a sturdy plant, so able to survive, and it grows extremely fast. I don't think there's a tree that grows faster than eucalyptus. You can plant it, and within a year you've got something huge. But basically the CO2 emissions began then, and also the population explosion. Because when we started mass producing all these goods at such a cheap and massive quantity, we also started mass producing humans.
Yes, we did.
At a cheap level. It is. I mean, this is why, you know, it's difficult to step outside of capitalism or our economic system and to see yourself as a product. But it goes hand in hand. Mass production of products and CO2, mass production of humans. It wasn't deliberate, but it happened because of, you know, decrease in fertility rates, or it just, you know, the whole kind of concept of the house and the nuclear family and the kitchen, and, you know, everything was there anymore, you know, food, just go to the supermarket. So, you know, we became, like I said earlier, we domesticated ourselves. Mm-hmm. And this was an even more dangerous step in our development, because by domesticating ourselves, what did we do? We disconnected ourselves from Earth and from danger, you know, talking about reconnection again. And you know, I would go as far back as when we made our first home, you know, whether it was a cave, whether it was, you know, some sticks in the ground and then some leaves on top, you know, that was the moment where we considered ourselves sheltered, which is good, but also we started thinking of ourselves as separate from Earth. Earth is what lies outside of our porch. So our porch actually became a trench in a new war that we now had with everything that is outside of that home. So what did we do is we just basically, we went out, we burned things, we brought everything inside, like one of my poems say, we brought everything inside and we put price tags on it. And we turned Earth into a supermarket. And we are working in that supermarket as slaves so that we can get paid to buy these products.
Yeah.
And we don't realize that actually we are products ourselves.
Yeah. And we ended up with an entire population that knows the price of everything and the value of nothing.
Oh, very good, Dean.
Yeah, we are the ultimate consumers before anything else. You know, I'm curious, somehow these times of COVID, so much lockdown, so much isolation, I'm curious how these times show up inside in your own personal experience. You know, what we both are pointing at is reconnection with deeper self. And these could be times when a person could start to take a bit of an inventory, start to scan within and see, where do I find meaning? You are somebody who's been at that conversation for a long time, long before COVID and so on. I'm curious if anything has shifted for you in your experience of those deeper elements, the parts to which we're talking about reconnecting with deeper self, reconnecting with other people, with Earth and with soul. These are just one way to talk about it. I'm just curious if that has changed or ripened in any way for you.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, because actually we've been talking for the last, I don't know, half hour about reconnecting, when actually there's also disconnecting, because we are hooked into this economic system, which I call the CO2 machine. And the whole purpose of the whole system is CO2 machine. More humans, more babies, more products, and then everything goes up in smoke to feed the CO2 cloud. Yeah. But in order to start reconnecting, you have to start disconnecting first, because
if I may, I ran into that same kind of, well, I got to disconnect first, and in working with that distinction, I started to use the word desaturating, because I'm asserting that we're all saturated from birth in this conversation.
Yeah. There's layers. Yeah. It's about taking layers off.
So if we can desaturate, we then have more of us to be authentically present in any given moment. If that's, I don't know if that's useful as a distinction instead of
and to me, what that means is that what I see, because I feel like I've changed in the last few years, and I can tell that because I look at the people around me and I feel how many of them are almost kind of, their whole identity lies on things like their job or fashion or which Netflix movie they're going to look at in the evening. All these things which are actually constructed, they are products, they are not parts of us, they are parts of these corporations that have created them. So, brands, movies, that they're all constructed things that are supposed to entertain us, but really what they do is they disconnect us from life. So what I've done in my life, and it's helped me tremendously, is I've become pretty much a minimalist. So I don't have stuff. I don't even have a pillow on my bed. I have just a couple of plates in my kitchen, and even the things that I do have, I still find that I have too many things. Once you start getting into this lifestyle of minimalism, you become grateful, of course, because the few things that you have become more important, and you use them more. You use them daily. I use the one mug that I have, I use it for everything. I drink soup here as well, so food goes in here as well, not just coffee or tea. And it's not even something that I kind of engineered, because I know there's a bit of like a fancy trend around minimalists. I'll have like the 20 items, and no, I didn't. That's not how it happened for me. I just felt disgusted at our economic system that manipulated me. I was constantly manipulated to buy clothes, to buy this, to watch this movie. And every time I think that someone has created that, not out of, not out of passion. It's usually, Hollywood, for example, is an industry. They follow this recipe of how to create a scenario for a movie. Every so often you'll get, an independent filmmaker or someone who has something to say that will create something that is truly meaningful for us. But like everything else, everything has become a product and an industry. So the more that we disconnect ourselves, and I forget the word that you mentioned, remove the layers, let's say, of all these products, all of these other hobbies and things in our lives that just take up our time and disorient us, then you become free, because you realize you now have made space in your life. I look across my wall and I see space. I've got nothing on my walls, Dean, and I used to paint. I don't want to have anything. It helps me to think, and it helps me to feel free. It helps me to feel weightless, literally. I can pack up and leave, and it would basically mean I just put things in a suitcase. I don't need a van or anything. So that's how I've done it. That's how helped myself regain some sanity by just completely simplifying my life. And it's true what they say, simple pleasures are the real pleasures, is what's meaningful to our lives. So
yeah,
over lockdown as well, I just reconnected with family and discovered things like cooking again and gardening. And for me personally, gardening is something that I feel a almost very, very deep connection to. And it probably has to do with how we are built. It was one of the first skills that we developed, was to nurture things and to hunt and to grow things. And it connects us to the physical environment out there.
right.
For me, gardening is one of the very few things that make me feel that I am connected, because that tree is depending on me to water it.
Yeah,
You are establishing a relationship with something that is non-human, and something that is then also connected to everything else around it. Because
yeah.
we're the only ones that are disconnected. Any kind of organism you pick out there, you'll find that it's connected to everything else. We're the only ones that are not on the ecosystem anymore.
Yeah. It's the word that I was offering is to desaturate ourselves, and I'm loving your disclosure of what that process has been like for you, what the experience of being in your now simplified personal environment, how that is for you. Can you say a little bit more, because you are creative in a number of different ways, and related in a number of different ways? And that may sound odd to say, but this reconnection idea, we truly can become far more intimate and related with our own deeper self, with other people, with earth, and with the elements that I lump into the term of soul. I'm curious if you could share a little bit more about your desaturation, your simplification, and can you share a little bit of what has shown up? How does that show up in your system in terms of what starts to emerge? Is there a different quality of ideas, or is there a different quality of sensation that's available that you can reference for what you might call a richer relationship, or a richer creative inner life? Is any of that sparking you to share any part of your process?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect this, but the more it makes sense. The more you desaturate, the more you remove things from your life, whether it's physical things or distractions, the more you begin to pay attention to things that you weren't paying attention to before. And this this is what happens in my book, where people do this as resources become more scarce and they become minimalists, and they I kind of push it to the science fiction end of the spectrum, where they actually begin to have superpowers. So they begin to be able to hear sounds from far away. They begin to be able to have premonitions. And this is not what happened to me, but what happened to me is that I was able to, for example, tell that every morning when I walked by the beach, there was never a day that was the same over 365 days in a year. The day wasn't the same. The birds, I could even start to see that the birds actually had moods. I was just astonishing how much you begin to notice, and your life becomes richer.
Mhm.
Because these are real experiences. They're not manufactured. This is not Netflix. This is not, the piece of clothing that you bought that you're just gonna put away. That is just an item that you don't know who made it, probably someone in a sweatshop, where the materials came from. You're completely disconnected. But when you are out in nature, for example, or where you are when you are just having some free time, something that is extremely impossible for many people today, actually being able to create free time, then it is amazing what you become aware of. And many of the things that you become aware of are things about yourself.
Mhm.
And this enriches you, of course, because the more you learn about yourself, the more meaningful you feel about your existence. And the more meaningful you feel about your existence, the less you actually need things or jobs or achievements to make you feel that you are meaningful.
Mhm.
It's almost like going off grid or going to a monastery. And it's the people. Many people have documented this, that their life changes and they feel richer the poorer they get.
Yes.
And it's true. This is kind of where I guess what I felt to some extent. Although I'm back in the city now after the lockdowns, I'm living a completely different life.
I consider myself to have a pretty large capacity to be able to be present to the tsunami of weaponized content coming at us 24/7, and so much of it is so derogatory, especially, well, the UK and the US seem to be particularly toxic for themselves and the world. Every once in a while, something gets through that capacity and overwhelms my capacity. And really the short word for it is it's heartbreaking. And I'm happy to share an example of that. And I'm wondering if you, from time to time, have something that just slips through and just breaks your heart or deeply disappoints, even in the face of the year upon year upon year of bad news. So this is a long way of asking the question, if this occurs for you. And a recent example is, I've been aware in much of my career, it was facilitation of training adults to work with troubled youth in the UK and the USA. And I could see while I was doing that that the game is entirely rigged against people of those lower socioeconomic levels, people of color. Everything was stacked against them. And to try and offer some sort of positive development practices or experiences for these young people and for those communities, that was heartbreaking. And that was, over a course of a 30-year career in that. But I'm recently, there have been some new updates. I'll see the occasional article, and it just, every once in a while, there's a bit of good news, and there's been a bit of that last year about acknowledging that young people around the world are feeling very appropriate climate anxiety and depression and a deep mistrust of the adults in the world. these things, instead of being pathologized, they're actually being acknowledged. So that there's a bit of good news, is that there seems to be a movement toward accepting and trying to address in a good way those very normal human emotions and reactions. There have been a couple of very, very disturbing pieces that I've just stumbled into in the last week or so. One of them is the data mining by big tech of not only every time we're on the internet, and not only every time we're in social media, and God knows how many other aspects of our lives in which we're tracked and commodified. But there have been significant efforts to similarly commodify the data that is collected off of suicide prevention calls. And I don't know if you're aware that there's a tremendous amount of suicide prevention work that's done by text. And for me, that was just heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking. Like, there's an innocent young part of me that asks the question, who have we become? That we're commodifying down to that most intimate conversation. You know, truly, what is a more intimate conversation than, shall I live or die? Can I share with you what is breaking my world? And is there a possibility in our interaction that I might not kill myself? I can't imagine a more intimate conversation. And to have those tentacles of the consumerist, hyper commodifying tendencies of our world to seep into that has recently broken my heart. It really kind of shocked me, and I'm currently engaging with my own support groups that I have in my body of work, and I've asked them, I need to do some shadow work, because my shadow was immediately activated. Rage, just this sacred rage, just this and you know, sacred rage and this shadow rage. And if I weren't as well resourced as I am, if I hadn't been doing shadow work for a long time, I don't know what I might have done in that level of rage. This is just a few days ago. So I don't mean to taint the question, you know, with my particular issues and so on, but I'm just curious if there are occasionally certain aspects of the world just get through and break your heart. And I'm wondering if you would share anything.
I've gone through my heartbreaks of living as a human in this system already many years ago. And it was a defining point in my development as an author, as a you know, climate discussionist, as a human who thinks outside of this system that we are in. Because this is the thing, is if you are successful in this system, you have no reason to question it. You know, you have no reason. And you know, these people who engineer these text SMS systems for responding to people who are in that dire moment in their life, they are just thinking completely cold and rationally, and it's just another manifestation of what our system is. Everything that we do in this society is now a business. Every single thing. And I know it sounds very harsh. You know, I know that you're in a profession where, you know, you think that that's not true, and it isn't true. I'm sure in the services that you provide, but at the end of the day, we all have to pay electric and heating, and absolutely every single thing that we do, because even the areas that were outside of the system have now been made hostage to it. And this is because of the internet. This is because of surveillance systems. This is because everything has become neural linked into our credit cards, our Facebook profiles. Everything has been made a business. Everything has been monetized.
Yeah.
Human suffering has been monetized. So I'm sorry you've had this moment recently. If I look back when I had my moment, it was exactly like that. It was anger. It was anger, and it changed me forever. And it actually had to do with, for me personally, it had to do with bullying at work. But it was just the beginning for me, because I realized that the whole system in the way in which most corporations function is they look at you as a product. They look at you as not even a human being. You are an asset to them. And talking about you just talked about rogue psychologists who believe in kind of AI becoming the therapist. I know that that's a trend in your field. There's also a trend in HR. Human resources, supposedly they take an oath to protect employees, but you have now an epidemic of bullying, an epidemic of burnout. Almost everyone I know has had it, who has a job in a 9-to-5 job in a company where you have lots of calls, lots of clients, you're on Teams all day, on Zoom, and the politics and the toxicity. And then you look at our politics and you see, who is the president, and who is the prime minister in the UK, who was the prime minister until recently in the US, the most toxic people.
Right.
So we have a system where the commoditization of everything, the manipulation of everything and everyone is rewarded. He who can manipulate, monetize, is the person that is promoted to the top. That's how I've dealt with it. Maybe I'm being too doomist, but that's how I've dealt with it, by accepting that this is the base reality, and that there are exceptions within that. There are good people within that. So it's kind of, a tapestry that looks more like a Hieronymus Bosch painting, and every once in a while you see a person that, there's a nun here. There's like a good person there helping someone get off the ground. It goes back to our conversation almost an hour ago of who we are as a species, and how we've come about. We've been blessed with this huge brain, and we still don't know what to do with it. All that we are using it for is to advance our own interests. More food, more entertainment, more. Everything is being done for humans. The problem is that our brain is so big that actually we have responsibility to this whole planet. We have the responsibility to control our own population, because we have no predator. If we have no predator on this planet, how will this population be controlled? Mm-hmm. How will it be controlled? We have to have a predator. Therefore, that predator has to be us. We need, you know, child policies. We need really extreme policies here that people find controversial. But, you know, bringing a child into this world is child abuse now, because we don't, you know, 5 years from now, the Fourth glacier from Antarctica is coming down. You know, we're talking about 7 meters. You know, we're still going to be alive. We're going to be on these calls discussing these things.
Yeah.
And the pandemic will just seem like a little blip. You know, it's coming closer and closer to us.
Yeah.
And there is unfortunately an element of evil in all of us. Mm-hmm. That's the only way that I've been able to function. And at least I feel that I'm free, and I feel that I'm not so deeply kind of deceived anymore by the system.
Yeah.
I'm still one of the lucky ones that have a roof over their heads. I've managed to get an education. I've managed to get a lot of things in my life, and it is something to be completely angry about, the fact that you come across people who are not being given opportunities that they deserve, and are also working now in a system that is just so manipulative that it's not only that they don't get the opportunities, the system is actually going to find ways to tell them that actually they're getting great opportunities. We live now in a world of fake news. Everything is manipulated. Even the reality that we all live is I feel it's all coming to a head, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how this manipulation and fakeness about everything can continue. We are living in a dystopia that not even the most advanced science fiction book could have envisaged. It's already happened. You know, I've seen a couple of episodes of Black Mirror and all these series that come out, and we are actually already there.
Yeah.
Right now.
It does seem closer to the Aldous Huxley version, in which everything is wrapped in that soma, in that everything's so geared toward our entertainment and distraction from meaning and any sort of authentic relating. So I can absolutely appreciate what you're saying. And just for, you know, as we close the envelope of our conversation today, I'd like to nudge just a little further up that ladder, those stages of awareness that I was talking about, and the one that I put at the top of that particular self-assessment is what I call the transformative, and that's where it has there's absolutely no importance on what the timeline is for what level of destruction out ahead. It's just the outcome is not a factor at that level. And yet the richness and aliveness that is available there is undeniable. And something we touched on very, very briefly earlier on is that, you know, to get to that level, to have access to that level consciously, it takes work. It takes telling the truth about what shadows I carry. It takes work to tell the truth about the level of disconnection that I have been complicit in my own life, and to some small degree in our collective lives. And so
I think this is the point, sorry to interrupt, that
Yeah.
the characters in that movie, Don't Look Up, get to at the end of the movie. I don't know if you saw the film.
Yeah.
You know, they are able to sit down have a dinner while the Armageddon is approaching.
Yeah.
This is kind of the place where you want to be. To be able to cherish every moment, and as far as personal transformation and things like that goes, and I mean, look, we're getting what we deserve. We have, there's I think it can only go so far. I think, to me, it's a bit selfish to try and kind of have this aim of kind of healing ourselves. At this point, it's more about I think having remorse. It is worth something. I mean, I know that it doesn't have a material result, but it would be something for me if at the next big step down that happens in this process that we are part of, that there is some kind of a realization collectively of remorse, of oops, we've made mistakes.
Yes.
To me, that would be something.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure that will happen.
I think it's extremely unlikely that it will happen. George Tsakraklides, I am so pleased to be reconnected with you after this long gap. And
it's been a pleasure.
I feel nourished every time and validated, deeply validated every time we talk and share. And I look forward to whenever the next one is. Hopefully we will do it far sooner than 2+ years.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing a bit about how you are self-regulating, how you are finding those inner resources to be able to move through these times and still be creative and expressive and authentic. I think it's a lovely modeling just by being able to be in conversation with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching another episode of the Poetry of Predicament podcast, produced by Dean Walker and the Living Resilience Alliance, www.livingresilience.net. Music today from Michael Hedges, as always, and also Port Blue Into the Sea. Also available on our website, www.livingresilience.net, is a wide array of articles, online learning series, arranging group and individual resilience coaching, and sign up for our every other Tuesday free support group that we call Safe Circle Calls.